Okay, Bitcoin is the topic. So I've got a few things to cover here, so I'll go quickly. So Bitcoin started with a dictionary definition. Type of digital currency with encryption techniques are used to regulate the generation of units of currency and verify the transfer of funds operating independently of a central bank. That's pretty good. We'll go with that. Obviously, you can go into a lot more detail. Check out the white paper. There's a lot of discussions about this. I've made videos about it, so we don't need to get into what the topic is. I'll cover just a couple quick points I think are important about Bitcoin, and then I'll go to these questions that came in on Twitter. First point, I think it's said a lot, but a lot of people, I don't think, unless you come from open source or knew what a cypherpunk was before you got into Bitcoin, a lot of people don't really get it. I wasn't in computer science, so I was a slow learner on those things. I had an economics background, so that helped in other areas. You need to know a lot about a lot of things to understand Bitcoin. Nobody understands them all. There are great coders who don't really understand economics. There's people who have both coding and economics, but they don't understand how the real world works. There's a lot of different things that you need. Knowledge of law, markets, what is money, history even. There's a lot of disciplines. There's been other people who've spoken about this as well. So anyway, if you didn't come from one of those disciplines, if you're lucky, you have a couple of them. If you're really lucky, you have a few or more. Nobody has all of them. But if you were somebody who didn't know about sort of open source software development and cypherpunk ethos, I think those things are really important. That's been my biggest learning experience in this. So I would start with looking at the people who are really active in development of successful open source projects, particularly Bitcoin. Listen to what the developers are saying, listen to the way that they think, how they talk about leaders, how they talk about authority figures, that kind of thing. Tied in with that is this Cyberpunk Manifesto, which I think is really important. If you're not from this, it might take several reads. I like to read it pretty often. My favorite concepts in here, and it's pretty short, really, but it has a lot of big picture philosophy in it. But it really talks about privacy and the nature of communications. But my favorite part is this part right here: cypherpunks write code. And so basically, cypherpunks see a better world because of code, and then you write that code and you just put it out there. And that's a pretty profound thing, and it changes the incentives, it changes the way things are done, it changes why people do things. I also like, there's a little loophole I found in here. It doesn't say cypherpunks write code well, so I would call myself an aspiring cypherpunk. I can write code, certainly I cannot write code well at all. By any stretch of the imagination. Maybe a WordPress site or something, but, or basic HTML. But if you're talking C++, then no, I can't write much more than a hello script. So anyway, that's a nice, so the point is anybody can be a cypherpunk if you can, you don't really have to write code because it says you don't have to write it well. So if you've ever written one line of anything and you believe in these values, you can be a cypherpunk. So I think that's important, and then ties into that. Here is the GitHub. You should look at this. If you're at all in crypto, this is important. It's big software right here. This is Bitcoin. This is what Bitcoin is. When people say this is what Bitcoin Core is, it's not really people. It's this. This is the software. And that's a mistake, by the way, to sort of say this group, even if it was a group of people. More accurate, you could say Bitcoin Core developers. Then it's people, but core is the software. So you could say developers of that software. But a lot of times people will say this group of developers believes this or believes that, and that's really not accurate. See, there's 548 contributors. Wow, that's up quite a bit in the last year. About a year ago, I was looking at some forks. I worked on a fork, and it was 500. It was 435, I think. So that's interesting. So there's a lot of people that have. Not all 548 of those people think alike. You have, even key contributors, the ones who have made important contributions or who've made a lot of contributions, don't agree. Gavin Andreessen is still listed as he's number 5, I guess. Not everybody agrees with Gavin. That some of these other people may or may not agree. These are diverse opinions. Luke Jr. has diverse opinions from many of the other people. I'm not trying to point to anyone with my mouse here, but it is a diverse group, and I think they would agree on that. So anyway, that it's basically just people writing something, and this is important because if you read through this and you look into how this works, this is an open source license, and people aren't really promising anything more than what it is. So the developers don't work for you. If you want to have them do something, you have to convince them why it's interesting or useful to them based on whatever motivations they have. And I know I'm fortunate enough to have met a lot of these people. They're not motivated by money. So you've got to really, I mean, now they are motivated by security. Pretty much anybody on this list, if you found a critical security flaw in Bitcoin, even was something that was 1 in 500 chance, a 1 in 500 chance of a critical security flaw, if it was legitimate and clearly articulated, every single, probably, I don't know every person on here, I assume everyone, but certainly all the ones that I've met and know of would be all over that. They would be very, very, very motivated to talk to you. It's extremely unlikely that you found that kind of bug. Okay, so, oh yeah, what was I going to talk about here? All right, so the nature of open source and this cypherpunk stuff is important. It's important to ask, what is money, okay? Nick Szabo is one of the best people about that, and also one of the best experts about Bitcoin, and one of the best experts about cypherpunk. He probably, I don't know, maybe the term expert is a funny one in itself, because it sort of is like a leadership or authority figure, when it's really knowledge that matters. And you should look at somebody like these people. You know, Vladimir is knowledgeable. Nick Szabo is knowledgeable, and that's important. So, so it's not about him being expert is maybe not the best word, but anyway, the kind of writing he's done about what is money is important. And we don't have time to get into a whole bunch of that, but you know, think about the nature of what is money. Why were shells and rocks and copper coins and fiat? And in the town where my office is, there's a museum that has these little tiny dollars they gave out not that long ago. I think 150 years ago or so. There was little regional currencies. Certainly before the Civil War, it was more common. So, you know, why do people gravitate towards one? There are years and years of science that predate Bitcoin that have talked about this kind of thing. I think that's important. If you were getting into Bitcoin, those are the first two things I would look at: how open source works, look at what the developers are looking at and thinking of, and then what is money. And then the next thing I think of, which goes hand in hand, is think adversarially. All the people on this list, the developers, anybody who has been in this space a while, thinks adversarially, both personally and especially from a code standpoint. If there's a one error in here, even if it was a 1 in 100,000, I was kind of exaggerating with a 1 in 500 chance. Even if it's a 1 in 100,000 chance per transaction of some sort of critical error, that would be absolute catastrophe. Be ridiculous. You can't have security risks in Bitcoin. If you do, then it's no good. It's all about. It doesn't matter what it does. If it's not secure, then it's a video game. It's nothing. You know, World of Warcraft gold. You can say that you may snap your fingers and it appears in one place. Who cares? It's not real money. If Bitcoin's going to be real money, it absolutely, positively has to be secure. So thinking adversarially is important. And part of that is to think the world's a big place, okay? A lot of people have been lucky enough to travel around and see this firsthand. The world is a big place, and it's a dangerous place. And both in the laws of nature, the animal kingdom, or humanity itself, humanity is scary and nasty. And most of the people watching this probably are fortunate enough to be somewhat safe right now. But there's bombs and gunfire and firebombs all over the world right now. There's people getting their doors kicked down, even in so-called civilized countries like the United States, where we have more people in prison than the Soviets had in gulags. And we have, literally hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people who have, government authorities bust down their door and sometimes shoot family members, shoot dogs, put them in the cages. It's a very treacherous world out there. So you need to think adversarially and think about potential attacks. And what I would say to my fellow Bitcoin maximalists, although some would say, by the way, I have more of my assets in Bitcoin than every single other thing combined. So I definitely believe in Bitcoin. I do buy other coins, which some true maximalists wouldn't like. I support other projects, and I think everybody should have some money in the stock market and real estate, particularly if you've been fortunate and built up a decent fortune in Bitcoin or a small fortune or whatever you may have. It's wise to diversify. Stocks are a thing. They are always going to be a thing. There's always going to be companies that build stuff and make things and make a profit, and you should share in that. It's been historically a very good way to have wealth, and it's quite stable compared to Bitcoin or any cryptocurrency. And then real estate also, it is what it is. Now, currencies can go wildly up and down, and markets and Bitcoin or everything, who knows what's going to happen if there is a flippening. It could be, change the whole world. But if you own real estate, you own land, you own a building, that's a building. No matter what the economy says, it's something. It's worth enough to have a roof over your head. So you can have a home. I'm a big advocate of homes that are useful. So that would include farms or certainly income property. In most cities, at least in the United States, you can get income property where one or two or three tenants sort of pays your mortgage, and you can get a little bit more expensive place that's a little bit better investment. Be careful, don't go speculating and doing lots of leverage. I'm just talking about at the basic level. So that's think adversarially. Oh yeah, what I started to say to my fellow maximalists is, think adversarially. We're 3% into the $10 trillion game. That's nothing. Don't get cocky. Don't declare Bitcoin the winner. Don't think, it can't be stopped, all of this stuff. Yeah, I get it. I'm right with you. This code's real hard to stop, and you can't stop it entirely, but make no mistake, they can't crush it, but they sure as hell could slap Bitcoin back. We have unpredictable leadership in the world. All it would take is one phone call between the heads of a couple, the EU, Russia, China, the United States, something to tick them off, something to make them feel that this is a threat, and it could be declared, a felony in a couple major countries or in the EU or the US or something like that. I don't think that's going to happen. I certainly hope that's not going to happen. And we should work hard not to cooperate and get legislators to pass laws, but we should cooperate with the powers that be, meaning, established business interests and even banks, to show them ways that this is good technology that can help them. They don't really care about harming people generally. They care about making money. So if you can show a bank how to make money on this, then that's something else. I used to say, let's crush them, crush the old system. You don't want to crush people. there's a couple really, really evil people that hopefully will be displaced by this technology. But in general, most people, even some of the kind of deputies and the even the bankers, a lot of them, they're just looking out for their own self-interest, which you could say is evil, depending on what means they do for that. But if you can show them that this technology can be good for everybody and help the overall economy and help make things more liquid and make trade better, that should be positive. So think adversarially. Don't declare it over. So here's some of the let's see, questions. Reminisce about how glorious and revolutionary user-activated soft fork movement was. Well, it was nice to see everybody talking about this stuff and covering, talking in depth and arguing about technology and arguing about Bitcoin and security, which is so important. That's great. Batch selling, how does it affect the market? Well, there is a lot of OTC trading, which means over-the-counter trading. That's when you, instead of going in exchange, you call or message or somehow communicate with a broker who specifically matches up your order, usually a larger order, with somebody else's orders or what they think that they can move something on the market for. And depending on who the traders are, they may or may not take a good deal of risk. Sometimes it's just matching people up where they have constant buyers or sellers. Their strength is in their database. So these trades happen quite often now. Binary Financial, Genesis, Kraken, Circle, Coinbase, they all have OTC desks. Some of the big miners do quite a bit of OTC trading, as do merchant suppliers, groups like BitPay or Overstock, groups that have a lot of Bitcoin. They're continually trading these things. So it's there, and it does affect the market depending what it is, depending what the trades are. But you can move quite a bit. You can move millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin without moving the market at all. Same with Ethereum. You could pretty much get the current price, a couple bucks less for millions of dollars worth of Ethereum and some of the other coins that trade more actively. Depends on the desk and so on, but certainly in Bitcoin, no problem. Thoughts on HODL and BISC network? It's hard for me to comment on different projects. Just the other day, a friend of mine from a project called me and said, "Hey, what's up? Why are you criticizing my project?" Or, you know, I heard you aren't as bullish or something. I'm critical of everything. I mean, it's Game of Thrones. I did a video on that the other day. This is dog eat dog, crazy, hectic world. Almost everybody is likely to fail. I'm not saying that about these projects. I don't really know too much about them. I know very little. What little I do know is actually somewhat positive, but I please don't take that as an endorsement because I haven't researched them enough to know, you know, what flaws they may have. But it sounds like they're in the sort of same interest areas that I have around the future of you know, how assets are securitized or tokens are you know, securities are tokenized. Okay, pros and cons of the next 5 years. So that's a good question. It makes sense to, I don't think it makes sense to trade Bitcoin a lot. You have a big picture philosophy, this is going to work or not. If it doesn't work, it's more ridiculous than the tulip boom. The tulip boom only lasted a very short time. This has been going on 10 years now. So if this, and it's much bigger than the tulip boom, it's global. So if this does fail, then it's ridiculous. I mean, literally this kind of video will go down in history of people laughing at it, and laughing at me, and laughing at my friends. Like we will be the greatest fools in the world if this doesn't work. So it's still a big binary play. Is it going to work or not? I think it will. So if it does work, then 5 years from now we have a lot of advantages of that. You know, that, you know, could be a big difference. Could be a very different, you know, very different world. If Lightning Network is the answer to the scaling problem, when will Bitcoin become private and therefore fungible? I don't know if Lightning is the answer. I certainly hope so. A lot of smart people working on it. A lot of people much smarter than me who say it's the answer or an answer. There's some smart people who think it's not an answer. One of my keys in this space is to try and know what I know and know what I don't know. And I'm you know, I know some stuff really well, but I'm not gonna pretend that just because I've been active in this field for a while that I have the kind of high level security and computer science expertise to fairly and properly evaluate Lightning Network. You really just don't unless you have developer level credentials. You know, that's it. It's just like you out of your mind if you're arguing with me about securities tokens. You just don't know what you're talking about. But you know, it's the same for people. There's a lot of people with my kind of background, business people, CEOs, who go and start acting like they're experts talking about the security risks. And I don't think that you can do that. I know these folks. I'm friends with some of these developers, and you can't, you know, they're the best in the world at what they do, and you can't just know Bitcoin a bit or know the basics of you know, the code or know the economics really well, and all of a sudden know the security things. So what I try and do is find people that I think are smart. I try and ask critical questions. Don't get married to any one idea or side. Stay away from sides in general. Be open-minded. Listen to everybody. You know, I listen to Bitcoin Cash people. I listen to Bitcoin, you know, non-Bitcoin Cash people. So yeah, I think that Lightning is very exciting. I do understand some of the criticisms, but certainly I believe that it's very good technology, and I would support it. It's particularly useful for the stuff I'm interested in most in this space, like securities, which work for Bitcoin, by the way. When I talk about securities tokens, I'm not talking about, I'm talking about cryptocurrency in general, certainly including Bitcoin. Bitcoin would be my biggest bet on securities tokens, just like it is for everything else. How to factor in Bitcoin fluctuations if a multinational corporation does deals that are more than 2 or 3 quarters. Okay. You can't really. That's a drawback now. You've got to let this grow. Companies that believe in it more, or companies that have a strategic value. Maybe if you're a company dealing trade in Venezuela, you don't mind that kind of volatility. But yeah, volatility is an issue. We got to just hope it keeps growing, and then eventually it gets large enough that that things are priced in Bitcoin, and it doesn't seem as volatile, or it isn't. It ultimately isn't as volatile. Why it's important to encourage your friends to adopt Bitcoin rather than ridicule them for not having any. That's important. It is easy to ridicule people. I've been ashamed that usually it was sort of revenge of people who ridiculed me years ago, saying, you're a fool, you don't know what you're talking about, you don't understand the economy. And I had the same arguments I'm having. I said, no, I really do. I've been doing this my whole life. I really think, you could say I'm wrong, but don't say I don't know what I'm talking about. I grew up in this. You may not like my food, but if you're a chef, you're still a chef. So it was usually revenge, but it is easy to ridicule people for not having any. Usually that happens more on up markets. Might not be right now. It humbles people when they get smacked, especially if it hasn't happened a lot. So yeah, you should encourage people and tell people about it, and tell people why you believe. It sounds like a religion, but why you believe, and hopefully it's not just about hoping you're going to get more money, and whatever you do, don't tell your friends they're going to make money on this. I've never told people that, and it's been good, because it's too hard. You got to have a stomach. You got to believe in it, because you're gonna have money go up and down, and if you don't believe in the fundamentals, you won't have the stomach typically to hold on in those down points. And you want them to either have that conviction and do it for the right reasons, or don't do it. Not because it's some idealistic thing, but just because it won't work for them otherwise, and they'll end up losing when you make money, and then they'll be even more ticked. And in my years as a financial advisor, I learned it's an old rule. Just don't mix friendship and money. That includes giving tips, even if you're sure of it. If it's a volatile, risky asset like Bitcoin or any crypto. Be very cautious. Educate people. You can spend hours and hours talking to them about what sound money is and why it works, but don't tell them to do it. Don't tell them to do it because they're going to get money. Our big blocks, an actual solution. What are the disadvantages? A lot of stuff's been talked about with this. Some of the brightest minds say that it offers significant securities risks. Other people are, not so conservative, and that's what's great about forks. You can have different methods. Try and see what happens. Will sort of speed and a moving fast method of Bitcoin Cash work? Well, yeah, it work until it doesn't. And I don't know when or if that will be. Maybe they'll luck out. Maybe they're not really taking securities risks. I don't know. But some experts say that they are taking securities risks, and some of those are the best experts around. So that in itself makes it a risk. So it is a risk. If somebody says it's a risk, that's a risk. You may disagree with it. You may say, no, it's fine. I can drive at 100 miles an hour. It's not a risk for me. But if an expert says it's a risk, then you should at least consider that. So they are taking risks, but in the thought that adoption will. And that is sort of true. If you have adoption where it gets large enough, as long as there's not a critical security risk, then it will work. But if there's any critical security risk, then it won't work. Strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats of Bitcoin. Strengths, network effect, a lot of depth. You go and look at this. Look at this. 17,000, what was it? 17,291 commits. And it's not easy to just make commits. I keep looking for a spelling error so I can get one, but I don't have any. I think I have a couple acts or something. That's about it. I don't have anything on here. I don't have the skill. And you could have a hell of a lot more skill than me and not have the skill to be on here. So that's cool. You get a lot of really good developers and things like that. Weaknesses, watch out for threats. Think adversarially. You don't know what's going to happen in the world. You don't know what risks there are. It's a scary place out there. Opportunities, well, you could become the global money supply, the global standard of currency. That would be cool. And everything gets priced in Bitcoin. There's a whole new era of freedom and prosperity and liquidity for the world. And people are finally out from the tyranny of, thugs who decided at some point that they should control the money, which is a preposterous thing. Even the biggest statists, if you put them in a room and said, give me the top 100 things government should do, of all the stupid things that they put on there, universal health care and everything else, nobody would put it, they wouldn't even think to put money on there. Money should be between people. You want to trade what you trade, you trade. I want to bring barter back too. I think that's going to be pretty cool about crypto. As more assets become tokenized, you're going to have barter, and a lot of these may trade on the Bitcoin video. So a lot of these will trade on the Bitcoin chain through side chains, or even merge mining isn't really the Bitcoin chain, isn't the Bitcoin chain at all. But there'll be a lot of connections with Bitcoin to this. There's with side chains, some of the stuff that companies like Blockstream is working on. Although I don't fully understand Liquid, from what I do understand, it sounds like it'll have a lot of implications for this kind of stuff and changing the world and the way that money and the economy works. Okay, will Bitcoin be able to operate as an open ledger and an anonymous currency? I hope so. Hopefully part of that network effect. Oh wait, and what's opportunities and threats? Threats are watch out in the world. The world's a big place, and don't just discount the people. There are powerful people that will be displaced from this, and depending what country you're in, those are the kind of people who can bust down your door and shoot you in the head. So don't just discount them like, oh, haha, we have this unbeatable technology. It depends on a censor-resistant internet. If countries just blocked the nodes that you could have Bitcoin on while simultaneously having multiple countries declare it a felony, yeah, you can sit there and say rah rah. And by the way, all the major Bitcoin companies and exchanges would immediately be shut down, all the money be seized, and the top 500 people stupid enough to be identified as leaders, myself included, would all be in big trouble. Yeah, that may not stop it, but you can go home and run your VPN and your node, and you can trade your thousands of Bitcoin, which are going to be worth pennies, with other people. Good. It's a science experiment at that stage. So don't underestimate the power of thugs. They've done a lot for a lot less. So it's better if people feel that they will win from the people on up, and then the politicians either reluctantly go along. They do like the guy in Lord of the Rings when he realized the third one, that jackass bureaucrat from the town, and then he kind of pretended that he was, oh yeah, I was on your side too. That's what you want. You want politicians to say, oh yeah, sure, Bitcoin, go, freedom. It's good that it's not too political right now. But you don't really want these people as enemies. I love the anarchist spirit, but you don't want to poke the bear. I was talking to a friend of mine who's in this industry, who's from Russia, and he says, I love the way you people talk about freedom, but when I hear things like F the government, I cringe. He's like, you don't say F the government. Government will kill you. And he's looking at it from a different lens. When you have free speech, it's easy to talk tough, but you really don't want to mess with these people. So that is a threat. We don't like it, and we could say, rah, rah, we'll overcome it. And hopefully we will when it's silly little regulations. But if it was ever really all-out war, this is a currency war, and currency wars are usually a big deal. There's a lot at stake. The United States has bombed countries for a lot less than trying to replace our entire currency. So make no mistake about it, there are people who care about this who are not the kind of enemies you want. Hopefully we can overcome, but hopefully you don't even have that war be real bloody. It's just kind of a disruption. That would be a better way. And hopefully it will. Address whether Bitcoin will be able to oh, we just got that one. Oh, and can it be, oh yeah, I didn't get to this one. Yeah, I hope so. There's not, unfortunately, with some of the privacy coins focused on this, there's not a ton of focus on making Bitcoin anonymous. It's not in the same league as some of the privacy-focused coins like Monero. So maybe we'll see what happens. Maybe you have, and again, this goes back to the big world thing. That's why it's never going to be that there's only going to be one currency in the world. We wouldn't want that. The world is too diverse. Some people are going to prefer dead authoritarians on their money, and they call that money. And who are we to say they're wrong? I think they're wrong, but they think it's money. So it's money to them. It's just like this nerd money is money to us, and that's what makes it money. Institutional investment. New York Stock Exchange. New York Stock Exchange is interesting. They'll probably be trading crypto. Certainly a lot of interest in the securities tokenization stuff. When you start seeing Bitcoin on the same trading platforms and statements as Google, that's going to be really cool. And it could be that Google tokenizes, or it could be that Bitcoin gets put on those exchanges, or it could be both. I'm on the board of T0, which focuses on that area, that kind of nexus, and they're trying to do both of those things, and I think a lot of others are too. How did Bitcoin grow before the FOMO? That's really interesting. I mean, it really, really is crazy to think back of it, because it was so ridiculous. Nobody thought, now it's dominated by people who want to make money. Nobody thought you could make money back then. I thought that the first conference I went to was a really dumb investment. I'm like, this is never going to lead to anything. So putting money into it was just so speculative. And whether you love him or hate him, Roger Vere's video back when he said he made the bet that I think Bitcoin was at like 12, and he bet $10,000 it would outperform stock. You got to put in perspective how utterly crazy that was. It was unheard of. Now we have this lens where we say, oh yeah, it happened with Bitcoin and F and this and this and this. Bitcoin was the first. That never, ever happened to have some weird speculative nerd money thing like that do well. So it is interesting how it grew, and it grew among 12 true believers who believed in the principles of this, who really believed that it was better money, and not so much that it had a chance of doing some crazy growth, but just that it was better. And so that was interesting. Scaling solutions if Lightning fails. I don't think Lightning will fail. It may or may not live up to the expectations or promises that people have, which could be unrealistic expectations, but it will certainly help with scaling. Now there's other scaling solutions, a whole bunch of things that people are looking at, and that's not, I'm not the best one to judge these things about what they are. And then I hope this comment, to my earlier video, I said nah is one of my favorite words. It's the words of Rosa Parks, because it's sort of an indifferent defiance to authority. So, nah is a great word. It's a word that only a free person would say, not somebody under the thumb. Yes ma'am, yes sir, that kind of thing. That's not so much as freedom. It's just sort of an indifference. I don't want to move back to the bus. Nah, I don't want to go back to your fiat. Bitcoin. Thanks for the questions. Hope this is useful.